everybody. Welcome to the Hallmarkies podcast. We are really excited to be here today to be talking about some mysteries. And these are always so much fun to talk about. And we have a very special guest. I'm film critic Rachel Wagner. And we have my dear old dad is here to talk about these films. And so, Dad, thank you so much for coming on the podcast.
You're welcome. I'm more of a food critic than I am a movie critic. But yeah, it'll be fun. I look forward to it.
Yeah, so this is your second time coming on the podcast. And I had asked you last year if you would be interested, because they have these mysteries, these cozy mysteries here on Hallmark. And you were always a big, at least, Sherlock Holmes fan. And so I thought it would be fun. And so it was perfect. It's the exact same time as you were on last year. If you'd come on again, and it's kind of fun because we got to talk about 3 different series this time than we talked about last time.
All right, let's do it.
Yeah, very good. So, all right. Well, so we're going to talk about the January mysteries that they aired, and we're going to start off with the crosswords mysteries. This is Crosswords Abracadabra. And what you don't know, Dad, is that this was originally scheduled for, I think it was October. And they had done all the marketing, and they'd even done a preview show. And then all of a sudden, they found out that Lifetime was going to be starting their Christmas coverage that weekend. And so if they aired this movie, that would mean that Lifetime beat Hallmark to the Christmas punch. And that couldn't be. And so all of a sudden, literally 3 days before it was supposed to air, it was canceled and Christmas was started. And so then we got moved to January. And so we've been anticipating this film for quite some time. And so yeah, that's a little backstory into the scheduling craziness of Hallmark Channel. That they got to be the first to start airing Christmas, which was interesting. So anyway, and this is, I think, the 4th of the crossword mysteries, and you haven't seen any of the others, and the one thing that they have struggled with, so you have this dynamic of this crossword puzzle writer and this cop, and one thing they have struggled with is involving Lacey's character in the stories. Sometimes it's felt like a pretty big, aside from the very first one, which there actually was a crossword puzzle involved in that crime, they've struggled. And so it's going to be interesting to talk about this and see how they did. But the summary on Hallmark Channel is, the summary is: a well-known magician drops dead in the middle of a dangerous trick on stage in front of a packed audience. But when the sudden death turns out to be murder, New York Sentinel crosswords editor and part-time sleuther Tess Harper and NYPD Detective Logan O'Connor team up to discover exactly whose sleight of hand is behind the deadly "now you see him, now you don't" stunt. Together, they must uncover the not-so-obvious clues and work their investigative magic to bring a killer to justice. So, what were your overall thoughts about this film and the sort of the series as you saw it from this one movie?
I like this film. I liked it the best of the 3 we're going to review. Mm-hmm. They made a tie-in through her. Tess was taking magic lessons at the kind of school that's part of the theater and school and operation, and so it didn't really have anything to do with crossword puzzle writing, but it created a pretty natural tie-in for the connection
and
with Logan. So
yeah, I think so. And she has her birthday at the magic the magic house, where went the night of the
Yeah.
crime. So that was pretty natural, I think, too. So I think they did a good job. This was also my favorite of the three. I I just thought the whole sort of layer of magic kind of made everything because there's a lot of contrivances in here, as there always are. But I thought that they made it more fun because there was a magic element to it.
Yeah. That and making magic part of the murder and the whole trick of changing bodies was very clever.
Yeah.
And not something that you would figure out until it came out, really, which is the point, I guess, of a good whodunit is you don't know. You're not able to figure it out in advance, so you stay interested right till the very end.
Yeah. So what do you think about Brennan and Lacey as far as their chemistry? Did you feel a spark between them? You think they did good together?
Yeah, I mean, they had the little romantic spark when they were dancing.
Yeah.
And that seems to be part of these mysteries. Obviously, they're always very attractive people and would naturally be attracted to one another. And that flared up a little during that part. But, it wasn't made a big deal of, and it wasn't part of the plot or anything. So I think it worked pretty well.
Yeah. Brennan and Lacey have actually worked together, I think 6-7 times, I think, something like that. So they have a pretty natural chemistry together, and a lot of experience together. And not just on these mysteries. There's a whole series called All of My Heart. They were in a movie called Christmas Melody together. And so they have a pretty natural flow. And I really did love that tango scene. I thought that was really fun.
Yeah, they were, of the three pairings, they were the ones that seemed most authentic to me.
Yeah.
And most natural chemistry. I mean, where you're looking at them going, okay, they're not acting right now. This, you're in the story and in the moment.
Right. Yeah. So it opens up. I try to divide these stories into murder, victim, what I call family fun, meaning stuff like the dancing, just like the fun extra stuff, and then red herrings, which is most of the movie.
Right. Yeah. It is. And I mean, I've got to tell you, on the murder in this, it was pretty graphic, and I actually own a .357 Magnum revolver, really similar to the one
really?
And that is no toy. I mean, if you don't have ear protection on, the sound of that thing going off is enough to rock the place. And so I'm sitting there with my eyes shut because I didn't want to see what was going to happen. I mean, it's one of the most powerful handguns.
Oh, interesting.
You can buy. That. Yeah, it's super powerful. I mean, he was right when he said it's a deadly weapon. So I literally shut my eyes and then opened them after the gun fired because I didn't want to see it.
So the whole conceit of this trick, right, is that they have a wax bullet in the gun, and he has another bullet in his mouth.
Right.
So it'll look like he caught the bullet in his mouth, but then it ends up being a real dead body.
Yep.
And so it doesn't work. And the way they're kind of able to get around that is that the basically the body in the morgue is misidentified.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
Yes. And so
the accomplice to the murder, it's her husband, and
so she lies.
So she goes in and as though she's his sister, I think.
Yeah.
And identifies the body positively, and nobody really pays attention after that till the end.
Yeah. So there is a new crime reporter that's working named Reed, who's introduced in this movie, who's working with Lacey. So you see, with Tess, I should say. And then there's the dancing scene. That's really the only family fun I would classify as, I guess, her birthday party. You see her and her aunt there briefly, played by Barbara Niven. And I wish they would do more with Barbara Niven's character, because she's a good actress, but she's really just sort of a exposition dump for Tess to talk about the whatever she's looking into, kind of thing, for the story. But you see the magic trip, you see the shooting, and there's an assistant named Bianca. So this is the first red herring. Well, first you think, oh, it's a accident. It was just a trick gone awry. But then sort of pretty early, it's thought that Bianca is your main suspect, because her and the magician Alistair had been dating, and he dumped her when she asked to do a trick, and because she wants to get into magic, I guess. And so how convincing were you by that? Did you feel like she was suspicious, Bianca?
Yeah, she was suspicious a little, but once Logan said that she was the prime candidate and Tess said, no, she's not, then you knew, you're going to move on from there, because otherwise the show is going to be too short. So, and she, I don't know, it's a little bit strange. She seemed an awful lot younger than
that's
her
true.
love interest magician, the
right,
murder victim, quite a bit.
That's true. That's a good point.
And she seemed a little too, imagining her pulling off a murder like that for the right to go on the show instead of him. It seemed kind of a massive stretch too.
Yeah, I mean, it did seem like also a stretch that his brother would be that what was it, the day after? It had even been a week.
Pretty quick. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, they weren't, obviously they'd worked together and all, and then when they separated, they didn't care about each other anymore.
Yeah.
Well, that's not true, because they got into a fight, into a verbal altercation outside of the classroom.
Yeah.
So there were some intense moments in that little bit of the relationship you're exposed to, which I think was a good red herring.
Yeah. Because his brother, Cormac was the name. He's the one teaching the magic classes, and he wants to become a magician, but his brother is the big star, so there's definitely some jealousy there. And he immediately takes over and does the show.
Right, so that looks very suspect.
Right.
I'll get rid of him and step right in.
Plus, there's this whole trick that he's doing where the whole knife's in the coffin, and he almost kills Bianca in the trick.
Right.
The handcuffs aren't working right, and I
thought that was quite clever, but also I was getting nervous.
I know, me too.
I mean, he's about to shove the sword right through the center.
Right.
And
that's what made this one more fun, is because there was that added layer of kind of magic. So
when it comes to seeming fairly authentic, you're like, don't do it. Oh, no, don't do that. Right. You don't want it to happen. And then, so Tess comes in and saves the day at the last second.
Right.
Through some incredible deduction.
Right.
How she found the handcuffs that she was supposed to be using that she could open, and then realized that she was probably in handcuffs that she couldn't open, and she was about to be killed.
Right.
So that was brilliant.
Yeah, it was good. She's a smart one, Tess.
Yeah, very smart. I couldn't have figured that out.
No. So then we also get a red herring in a man named Paul Drexler, who's a businessman and that one didn't really go anywhere. It was just kind of he's the one that they kind of confront outside of his office. He's got his so you briefly see that. And we meet a woman named Julia Marquez, who is the dance partner of Alistair. And at first, she's the one that pretends to be. First, she's the one that misidentifies the body, but they don't know that at first. The coroner thinks she's his sister, Alistair's sister.
Right.
Yeah.
No, her whole role was woven in quite cleverly.
Mm-hmm.
When Tess first followed her up the stairs and she disappeared. Well, then that later turns out to be a secret passageway to the basement, and that was cool.
Yeah.
And then the dance class and the dance teacher and all of it made it mysterious as to what possible role she could have. It turns out she had a major. She was one of the two.
Yeah, because Tess notices that she's got some luggage out. It looks like she's about to bolt, about to travel, and she starts to be suspicious of her. And then they also notice that there's a whole additional part of the theater that's on the old blueprints approved and not on the new.
Yeah.
So they realize there's a whole section of the castle, and so they. I thought it was a pretty good sequence when part of you is like, why are these people why don't they go with any? Why did they go by themselves all alone into a secret passageway where people are getting murdered? But nevertheless,
well, that's what detectives do, but yeah, I like the way it ended though, where they weren't in a shootout, where the henchman guy passed them while they were hiding, and then they went up, and they were able to then later arrest them, and there wasn't a phony shootout at the end, or a threat to shoot when it was, would have bordered on absurd.
It's true. So, there really wasn't actually in this one the whole I'm gonna monologue and the guy with the gun holding up the amateur sleuth and monologue about everything, the whole plan.
Not only that, I liked it when they were at the police headquarters and he was interviewing them and kind of telling them what their destiny was and playing into magic, and that this is no trick. This is for real. And the way they caught them was good too. It was a more complicated, appropriate ending, I'd say, than the other two.
Yeah, I think so. And I thought for a second that henchman guy, I thought that he might be involved somehow, or might be kind of hired by somebody, or even for a while I thought maybe the head of the magic castle. I couldn't figure out a motive. There was no motive for him, but I don't know. He seemed a little.
Well,
I didn't entirely trust him.
He could be charged with attempted murder. He was in no deep trouble after it was all over. Yeah, that's for sure. And he's probably the one who dragged the body inside the casket box. So he was not a good guy.
What was his motivation for doing that? I can't even remember.
Well, he was related to. He was like the cousin of. Oh. I think
of Alistair.
No, of the dance partner.
Oh, right. Oh, yeah.
He was related to her. He had some axe to grind.
Yeah.
Julia. He had some connection with Julia, I think so.
Right. And so, yeah, it it all worked out, of course, in the end. And you have I thought it quite a bit of fun banter between Logan and Tess. As he's like, "What are you doing here? Why are you here? Like,
Right.
why are you looking into this?"
Yeah.
That was fun.
Yeah. I mean, in all of these, if you start getting too analytical about it, and as you know, I have a law degree. I'm not a lawyer, but you start looking at it from a legal perspective, and having a private individual become involved in police work, intimately involved, without being an employee of the police department is problematic. But in that sense, it hails back to Holmes and Watson. I mean, in a sense, Holmes was private detective though, but Watson was his, less professional
companion,
sidekick. Yeah,
that's true. That's a good point. Yeah. Well, I mean, and even what's I can't remember. Agatha Christie. She has I can't think of her name. Just left my brain, but she had the old lady stories. I can't think of the name of amateurs, an amateur sleuth, and and then you've seen that a lot in television, and in fact, and also there's a lot of cozy mystery books, and in fact, your mother, my grandma, she loved Mary Higgins Clark, who wrote cozy mysteries, who just passed away this week. So so she would write a lot of these kind of stories, and so I don't know, it's just kind of there's a certain degree of escapism and fun with this, and I really thought this one captured it well. I really enjoyed it, and so I give this one, I'm going to give it a pretty high score for what it's trying to be. I'm going to give it a 4 out of 5 crowns.
Yeah, I would too. I'd give it 4 out of 5. We're going to talk more in relationship to the subsequent ones about how effectively they pull off the setting.
Right.
And I think here they were able to make it more plausibly New York City than the other two did their two venues, which I actually, I like. The more authentic it is that way, the more believable the story is, because it's clear where they're trying to have it set.
Right. Yeah, and also it just makes more sense being in a big city that you're going to have more homicides. I mean, it makes it a little more realistic, but yeah, they did a good job with this one. We'd like to take a second and thank our sponsor for this episode of the podcast. They're the good folks over at HelloFresh, and they are America's #1 meal kit. And right now, if you go to HelloFresh.com/Hallmarkies10, use code Hallmarkies10, you get 10 free meals, including shipping. So that's an amazing deal. And I think that this is a really wonderful service. I've been doing it now for a couple of months, and I've really enjoyed it. It's so nice because it really works well with my lifestyle as a single person, because I don't have all of these bottles of sauces and spices and things like that I only need for one recipe. You get just enough for that recipe, and they have the recipe cards, and it makes it easy to follow, and it just gets me out of my dinner rut, so that I'm cooking different things, I'm trying different things, and it's a lot of fun. They have 22 plus seasonal chef curated meals each week. Everything I've made has been delicious, and they try to curate it so that it works with your allergies and with other things. You can get different type of kits. They have low calorie, vegetarian, and family friendly. You can get it in servings of 2 or 4, and it just saves so much time. If you're busy like I am, you don't have to go to the grocery store, you don't have to spend time planning. All of that is really really just makes life so much easier. And then you have the packaging HelloFresh uses to ship the food, almost entirely made from recyclable or already recycled content. They have a carbon footprint 25% lower than store-bought grocery-made meals. So it's a really impressive company. And more importantly, the recipes are yummy. And I think you'll really enjoy them as a family, or if you're single like me, it'll really be a great thing for your life. So go to HelloFresh.com/Hallmarkies10, use code Hallmarkies10 for 10 free meals, including free shipping. And all right, so let's talk about the Gourmet Detective, Rue the Day. And both of us, in this case, this is our first time watching a Gourmet Detective. This is their 5th movie that they've done together. And the idea behind this show, Dylan Neal was telling us on the podcast, I'll put a link down to his interview, but he was telling us that they're trying to get kind of that heart-to-heart kind of dynamic of that sort of witty banter kind of repertoire between the two. And so we're coming from a different perspective because we haven't seen any of the other films,
Right.
but they actually hadn't had a movie since 2017, which is why I haven't seen any of the others, because we haven't had the podcast that long, and because we just started in Christmas, just before Christmas in 2017, and I hadn't seen any of the previous films, and so but I don't know, it's an interesting dynamic. This one's kind of unique because it's, I think, the only one I can think of these mysteries where the girl is the cop and the guy is the amateur sleuth, I guess. And so that's different.
Yeah, and not only was she a cop, but her boss was a female as well.
True. Yeah, that's true. So the plot on this one, the summary is: Henry is hired to authenticate and purchase a long-lost and very valuable recipe book. Soon, Henry and Maggie find themselves in a murder mystery where secrets hidden with a treasure book have dire consequences for all who own it. So what was your overall thoughts about this one?
Well, actually, I think the part about the book was the most intriguing aspect of it, and that gave it its greatest strength. And I don't know how true the recipe book, the value, and whether or not private restaurants, keep those fastidiously over a long period of time.
Yeah, it would be interesting to know if, like, say a restaurant like Tavern on the Green, or, you know what I mean, like someplace that's been around a long time like that. It would be interesting to know if they have a chef's book. I'd be curious.
But yeah, books, I mean, I'm not into book collecting, but I know people are, and they can become very valuable. And I thought that was it was, not being an expert on things like that, I thought it was interesting and made for a good nexus for the story, I think.
Yeah, I agree. And I thought the whole idea of it being a forgery was a surprise that I didn't anticipate. And so that part of it was fun, and to hear about how they created the forgery. So yeah, I think we're pretty much on the same page.
Yeah, that added a lot of complexity to the story and to the whodunit part, really.
Yeah. Overall, there were things that didn't really work for me about this one. I felt like it was very convoluted, even for one of these kind of movies. And I don't know, there were just certain things we'll talk about that were just a little much for me, even for one of these kind of movies. But it wasn't without some charm. So
yeah, I mean, there are definitely situations that were so far over the top from reality. Maybe the most obvious one was the essentially tricking the homeowner into going in the home, then invading the home for evidence in the secret upstairs room, and then having having the dad pretend he was a
Yeah.
former police officer, I guess, but to have him pretend to be a police officer, having all this stuff
Yeah,
is
that's like a
so
felony.
yeah, I mean, actually, they're committing crimes.
Yeah, it's you can't impersonate a police officer. That's a felony. And
Yeah. Well,
yeah, and
you cannot gather evidence or
no.
go and enter without a search warrant.
Yeah.
I mean, so that's where I thought this one compared to the others was at its weakest. It was the
Mhm.
most, and the whole idea of people killing over this book and someone, um, who is well established, the grandson who's got
Mhm.
his well established estate and lifestyle, becoming a murderer essentially, and even seeming to relish the thought of killing both of them at the end and excited about it was
It was
kind of
definitely,
ridiculous.
yeah. It was definitely a lot. But it started out classic, this kind of thing with the you see the from the perspective of the murderer, and you see the gun and the antique store guy, Richie
Yeah, yeah,
Bonner. He's not long for the world, and and so I thought that was kind of fun, and then um and then we have some family fun in this. They talk a little bit, have some fun with these, that they're changing up the menu at Molly's and trying all these new foods. And then we also find out that, that Maggie is
right.
paying very close attention to her daughter on via social media and everything, who's in college. She's kind of cyber stalking her daughter, and that she's having a hard time letting go of her
Right.
daughter in college. So that's kind of there. And then you have the big family fun is that Maggie wants to take Henry to a baseball game because she loves it. She loves sports, and he is, your kind of Fraser Crane type of guy who likes the finer things and doesn't like sports. And so she's really excited. She's got him to go to a Giants game. She's got the foam finger and the things, but he wants to stop before they go to the game and go to this auction to try to buy. He's been hired by a mysterious benefactor to go and buy the chef's book because they know that he has enough knowledge to know whether it's fake or real or whatever. And that was her big mistake there. you never allow uh, you never allow a stop before something like that. You just gotta go to the game.
Yeah, I had a little trouble. She bought him a hat, and it was to go
Right.
to a San Francisco Giants game, and it had a totally bogus logo on the hat. It had a G, which
Yeah.
is their logo is one of the most famous in baseball, their SF logo. And so it
Yeah.
wasn't authentic at all, that part of it. But that's
Yeah.
just a little thing.
Yeah.
I mean, we talked about it offline that having grown up in the Bay Area and knowing it like I do, I could tell that most of a lot of the scenes were not
Yeah.
actually shot there. But that's
Right.
okay. I mean, I understand they have a budget. They can't go on location everywhere.
Right. Yeah, this was filmed in Vancouver, and well, in British Columbia. We assume it's Vancouver, and yeah, it's definitely true. I didn't notice that about the hat, but I don't know sports, so they probably count on that for their movies. But yeah, her letting him go to the auction was a bad move. No, don't do that, because of course things get dicey real quick. And so the red herrings start out pretty quick. We have Elsa Edwards, who is she's mad about the book being gone. She's upset, and she also doesn't like Henry because or he doesn't like her because she wrote a bad review of his restaurant, and she has the same gun that was used as the murder weapon.
That's amazing. I mean, these liberal San Francisco restaurateurs, packing semi-automatic pistols. It's
Yeah.
something out of kind of fishy there.
Yeah, right. Well, this is the upper crust, I guess.
Yeah.
But and also she wears the Black Dahlia perfume, which I guess is that he smells at the crime scene when they see.
Yeah.
So that's your red herring there. Then you have Leah Rollins, who is competitive chef. She kind of just wanted to look at the book, and she loves Henry, and she's kind of hurting. Her financials aren't doing so great with her restaurant. Did you buy that at all as a red herring?
Oh, not that she could have been the murderer.
Yeah.
Not for those motives.
That she would have done it for the book.
No.
No.
I mean, again, the whole thing that anyone would do it for the book is, a huge stretch, I think.
Right.
That's not as powerful a motive as you have in the other two. The other two had a more serious reason for criminal intent, I'll say.
So then you have Josie Klein, who owned the book, and she was going to put it up for auction. She decides last minute to sell it and not put it up for auction, and we find out that so there's this whole scene at the park where they have this whole what do you call it, not sting up, they have this whole thing planned where they're gonna catch this guy,
right,
that supposedly has the book. Well, the problem is, and I thought that was a pretty fun scene.
Yeah, I did too.
Yeah. And then Henry gets the book, and it turns out that it's fake and it's a forgery.
Yeah.
And the reason why he knows that is he can smell the walnut oil used to age the pages.
Right.
So
yeah, that was a clever twist.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a bit odd to have a non-police officer as the sitting duck,
right?
Even with a bulletproof vest on.
Right.
But
But then again, they would probably recognize a police officer.
Right.
So maybe it was the best. I don't know. But yeah, that was kind of a fun scene, and they find out that there's a tangled web where the family, the Belvedere family, didn't want the items they didn't want the book to be sold because there were lots of recipes using absinthe. And did you know about absinthe before watching this movie?
I've heard of it, but I wasn't knowledgeable. I'd say I just heard of the word.
Yeah, it gets. I'd heard of it too. Around down somewhere I'd heard of it, but yeah, it's illegal, and there felt this like sense of shame about the absinthe and being in all these recipes, and so that they forged the book. Josie did, to remove all that so that her family wouldn't be shamed, but then they could still get the money. And the guy who is Daniel Whelan is his name. He's the go-between for the book in the park, who also used to date Leah, who's the chef. He ends up murdered. So it's a double murder episode. So we know it wasn't him, and obviously. And then you also meet a lawyer, who's the one that was the one that contacted Henry about buying the book.
Right.
And you also meet they tried to do a red herring of the owner of the antique store named Goldstein, but that's not very convincing. And before, you had met Nicholas Belvedere, who seemed all like kind of supportive, but not I don't know, it was a little shady. He has like this fake Van Gogh, and I felt like they were that was sort of their way of being like, hint, hint, this guy is up to no good. Uh, but yeah, he is played by Layne Edwards, who we've had on our podcast, and I thought that it was kind of fun for him to sort of play this kind of campy, over the top villain. Like it's
well, his character went through 3 phases. So at first he denied any wrongdoing or involvement in a negative way. And then he admitted he was lying about that he had, and he starts then with his attorney at his side. Right. He starts, saying, I really wanted to get the book for these reasons, so on and so forth. And then the third stage, as you'll come to here, he turns out to be the bad guy.
Right. And before that, we forgot to say the reason why they find out about the walnut oil is because they stage this whole kind of coup with her dad and pretending to be a cop, and she sneaks into the book restores, the Goldstein guy, that sneaks into his house and finds all the proof of forgery. And that whole scene was almost, I felt like they almost had sort of Benny Hill music playing. Like it was too silly. It was
it was. It was the low point.
Yeah, for sure. It was it didn't work for me at all. And then the other part that to me didn't work is, like, I'm fine having the absinthe being an element, but the idea that making this special drink, this Emerald Dream, that would be so amazing. I don't drink alcohol, but I mean, there's so many different drinks that you could make that like making this absinthe drink would be worth all of the, all of this just so that they could have the Emerald Dream seemed like a lot to me.
Yeah. Well, the idea, I mean, surely they'd get caught.
Yeah. And also it could, like, I mean, there's a reason why it's outlawed. It's dangerous. It could kill people.
Well, that made them really bad guys. I mean,
that
made them really bad guys.
Right. Yeah. And so then they kind of put all the pieces together so there's this dramatic scene. They figure out, because there's this the Maggie is looking at the overhead shot of the Belvedere mansion, and she sees all these kind of greenhouse looking things, and she's like, what could that be? Where are they getting all this wormwood for the absinthe? And so they go to the greenhouses, and they find all of these wormwood plants, and there's a whole scene with Nicholas with a gun, like actually like shooting at people, and you even get a scene where Maggie ends up shooting him in the leg.
Right.
And so, it was definitely over the top. It was kind of fun, but I may be projecting just because I know the actor, or I've met the actor a little bit. But she shoots him in the shoulder. But that was usually, I've never seen that in another Hallmark movie.
That scene it was supposed to create a lot of tension at the end, because there was a shootout at the end, but it begs the question of what Belvedere possibly could have expected the outcome to be. He was going to kill them both and bury their bodies in his property, and no one would ever figure it out in the police department at that point. When so it was if you go too far, it was silly, but I think the best part of this show was the book and the absinthe and that whole kind of complicated scheme that tied the two together.
Right.
And the irony of, he wants the book so his family doesn't look bad, but he's in the business of supplying wormwood for absinthe for the drink
Right.
to make money at the time. So that was, I thought, the strongest part of the of the show.
And it was cute at the end when she's like, okay, we're going to go to the baseball game or whatever. And he ends up bringing her daughter back, and she gets to go to the game with her daughter.
Yeah,
that was cute. No, you didn't like it?
No, I don't know.
So yeah, there you go. So that's this one. It was too convoluted. I did not like that imitation scene. It was definitely, like you said, the low point. And so it wasn't a great introduction to this series, in my opinion. For me, I'm going to give it, maybe this sounds harsh, but I think it's what it deserves. I'm going to give it a 2.75 out of 5.
Oh, we can use decimal points?
Yes, you can. Yes.
Yeah, I'll go. Well, again, I don't have a history of doing this, so I'll go 2.8.
All right. Sounds good. All right. Last one. So this was actually a pilot for a new series, and we're actually getting the second one in February. So they're pretty confident about this series. It's unusual. It's called A Beautiful Place to Die, a Martha's Vineyard mystery. And it's unusual for a Hallmark movie in a lot of ways. Mainly, the biggest thing is that it has a male lead instead of a female lead. That is very rare. And so you have Jesse Metcalfe in the lead. And so, that's interesting. Interesting dynamic. He's very popular amongst many Hallmark people. And I'm not a big fan of him on Chesapeake Shores, which is another show that is not my favorite. But I think he's serviceable as an actor. He's not my favorite, but I think he's fine. So I don't know. It's just an interesting dynamic. You have him playing. There's really no amateur sleuths in this one, which is different too, because you have him as a retired detective, and you have Z, who is medical examiner / daughter of a chief of police. So
she's really a practicing doctor with past experience as a medical examiner. And so she is kind of the amateur. She goes way beyond what any forensic role would be in her involvement in solving the case. So I would say she still fills that role of amateur sleuth, because she's first presented as his doctor in the emergency room and as a conventional doctor. Then she gets involved. When she gets involved in the story, she's able to function in the role, in the forensic role, because of past experience. But that wasn't her current medical job.
But they're both professionals adjacent more than some of these other ones, at least. Than a crossword puzzle writer.
Yeah, because she does stick more to what she's qualified to do professionally. I'll say that. That's true.
Yeah. So it's interesting. It's an interesting setup. So this one, we just have a little plot summary. It's just, after being forced into early retirement, former detective Jeff Jackson returns to a quiet life on Martha's Vineyard. Quiet, at least, until a body washes up and he's drawn back into crime solving. So there we go. There's not really a ton of family fun in this one. Just some scenes of them fishing. You have some father's kind of son moments.
No, actually, it's father-daughter, right? The police chief is Z's father.
Right. You have some moments between them, and then you have some moments between him and Jesse's character too, don't you? All right, it's been this is the one I saw the least recently. So
the one that goes on through the whole film, through the whole thing, is Z and her police dad, her police chief dad. And I thought the police chief dad, he played the part really well.
Yeah, he did good. He was good. And then you just have some, because this is a first one, so they have some backstory to do. So you find out about his the bullet that he has in his back. You find out that some stuff about him and the case that made him retire.
Yeah, I thought the flashbacks were fairly compelling.
Mm-hmm. You find out that Z, that she, as doctor / medical examiner, like you said, that she has a history with Jeff. Like, I don't think they ever really like dated, but they kissed, and they
in
had
high school.
Blurred, when they were
And
young.
they're much older now. Yeah.
Yes. And one fun thing that fans of the podcast will appreciate is our friends over at the Bubbly Cess podcast. They're Jackson Shaw are their names, and they interviewed the writer of this movie, Craig Weinman, and he agreed to name a character after the two of them. And so the reporter, played by Chelsea Hobbs, the reporter was named Jackie Shaw after
that's funny.
after our friends, which is kind of funny.
Yeah.
They wanted, on their podcast, they said they wanted him to name the murderer after them, but I guess they decided not to do that, which was funny. And so, you have this reporter, Jackie Shaw, on the case. And so basically, we've got our red herrings in this one. You have this, the first one is you find out the person murdered is this this guy named Ray that you find floating in the water, and you find out that he really wanted to talk to this family, the Martins, and talk to what was his name?
Gerald Martin.
Gerald Martin.
Who's a very, very well established,
successful
accountant.
Yes, and they have this fund that's called that's sorry, I lost it. Where is it? They have this fund called Harriet's Hope, and that they have, and it's being investigated by the IRS because are they skimming things? Are they being straight on their taxes? And but Ray, he finds out that his mother had been receiving checks from a lawyer associated with Gerald Martin, with the Martins, and so he wants to find out more. He thinks that this Gerald is his father, so he's trying to figure out what's going on. So that he ends up showing up murdered, and okay.
And he shows up in town and he makes a big awkward scene at one of their big events.
Right. So they have this big fundraising gala.
Yeah.
And so that's your first red herring. So you have Gerald Martin, that he's rich. He's got this class of 85 ring, which I guess is the same year as Ray's mother. And then this Jackie Shaw is investigating it, thinks that she wrote a whole article on him, and he's just real snobby. He's a real, what you think of as Martha's Vineyard type. And then he has two kids named Brad and Stacy, and they become sort of the main suspects.
Yeah,
Brad and Stacy, and particularly when they find these bricks outside, and they are able to, it's glass bricks because they're doing a renovation.
Yeah, it's called block glass.
Yeah. And so they find Stacy's prints on the block glass, and so that becomes a big suspect. Did you think that was?
Well, it's because they found a tiny fragment of glass in the laceration in his head, and they traced it back to that pallet of glass.
Right.
And then they found her fingerprints. So that was a fairly good red herring. Yeah.
There's also this whole thing of they don't see they check the cameras at the event,
right?
And when they see different people coming and going, and when they see Brad and Stacy leaving, that's also kind of convincing. But the problem with Brad and Stacy is they don't really have a motive for why.
Yeah, I mean, their only motive is this potentially illegitimate brother is going to crash their scene, mess up their family life, and create a nightmare for their father and their family, and potentially for their income, their status in the community. I mean, I think that's what they're trying to convey in the story as their plausible motive.
Right. And then you have Helena Parsi and Thomas Percy, and her car is stolen, and she has her business card in Ray's hotel room. So they think, oh, is she somehow involved? And then there's also this guy, Donovan Fletcher, who owns the boat. And there's a scene where Donovan's bodyguard attacks Z and tries to fight Jeff for being on the boat. So that they try to have a thing there. And then you have this whole thing with them skimming money and this audit and Jackie Shaw. And the big moment at the end is that you have Thomas. He says, "To love and be loved is everything," and that was in Ray's mom's yearbook. That was the quote, and so that's kind of this big aha moment. And there's this woman named Peyton, and she kind of runs everything at Harriet's Hope. She's hosting the gala, and so it turns out that Peyton is the murderer. Peyton is the bad one.
This genteel woman, who all of a sudden is capable of murdering for her charitable foundation.
Mm-hmm.
That's a little bit challenging. And then in the end, if you remember, she grabs Z with it, and she suddenly has her own handgun too.
Right.
And this philanthropist with a semi-automatic pistol, and grabs her. Fortunately, she doesn't shoot her. She doesn't pull it off. But I mean, to me, that this was the weakest part of this one was the ending.
Yeah, I have to agree. I was always kind of suspicious of her because she just was just kind of a jerk, and so it was.
Well, I think one of the ideas of these shows is to have the bad guy or bad gal is someone that you'd least suspect in the beginning,
right?
And then it's like at the end, it's like, oh my gosh, it's her,
right?
Or it's him, and so that was. I mean, that was fairly effective that way, but the motive is so weak, to me, for murder. You have to imagine, so this is a person who probably never committed a crime in her whole life, suddenly is capable of murdering not one, but potentially more, in order to save the reputation of her charitable foundation.
Well,
that's where I struggle with it.
Couldn't she have gone to jail for all the skimming the books?
Maybe, I don't know. In all likelihood, with the IRS in a situation like that, you're going to just have to pay back.
Uh-huh.
Well, what it does is what it primarily does is you lose your 503c status as a charity. And so then you're no longer able to get donations where people can have a write-off. And, I mean, again, that's a pretty big stretch for murder.
It couldn't be like mail fraud or bank fraud or anything like that. Yeah, interesting.
But at the end, what's she going to do? Kill both of them, both Z and Jeff, and jump in a boat from Martha's Vineyard and flee to Havana or something? I mean, there's no out at that point.
Excuse me. It was that. I agree with you. I agree with you on this. I think it was a pretty solid start, though, for a series. I'm not 100% convinced on Jeff and Z as their chemistry together, but I want to see more of that, and we'll see coming up in a couple of weeks. But I think that I walked away from me like that was pretty good start. They did a pretty good job, and I'm curious to see where it goes. I think they have a pretty
they're going to have
cast.
a lot more murders in Martha's Vineyard,
Correct.
than they've had traditionally, according to the show. I told you offline again that one challenge I had with this was I was really actually interested to see the whole thing set in Martha's Vineyard because I've never been there.
Right.
And I wanted to see the scenery and the architecture and that, and it became clear they just showed, as they do in all these shows, they'll show a helicopter fly. It's either that or a drone shot above that's doesn't have anything to do particularly with the show. But then the show is actually filmed, like you said, probably in Vancouver, because I actually watched this with Mom, and I'm seeing these scenes of the marina, and I'm seeing mountains in the background, and I'm like, that's not Martha's Vineyard.
Right. Yeah.
So
that's totally fair.
So I would have, and again, now I think about it, that's probably for the scale of the production, the audience size, and the budget to haul everybody off and produce it in Martha's Vineyard is probably unrealistic. But I got and maybe I'm just a little too detailed on this, but it's about Martha's taking place in Martha's Vineyard, so I actually wanted to see Martha's Vineyard more. But.
Yeah, and I wish that some of these, like, I don't understand why it necessarily always has to involve murder. Like, it'd be fun if I think you could do a really fun one with like a Ponzi scheme that someone's investigating or something like that. Like, it doesn't always have to be murder, but I guess it's part of
the whodunit theme is pretty predominantly based on murder. But it could be a drug deal, or it could be there's plenty of other crimes, some of which you wouldn't want to use, but
right, you obviously don't want.
That's the thing. And when I reflect back on the Holmes stories, a lot of them don't involve murder. Or it comes close, but he saves the day. Not always,
right?
But some of them are not that at all. There's some, crazy scheme that's revealed, and all the dominoes fall after that. But
I guess it goes back to like Murder, She Wrote. The Cabot Cove and all that. A lot of murders for a small town in Maine. Going back, But anyway, I liked this. I thought it was pretty solid. The next one is called Riddled with Deceit, Martha's Vineyard.
Wow.
Yeah. So anyway, I'm going to give this 3.25 crowns.
Yeah, I'll give it 3-4.
All right. Very good. Okay, good. Well, I think this was a lot of fun. I really enjoyed talking about these with you, and thanks so much for coming on the podcast again. It was a lot of fun, and we'll have to do it again.
Okay, I'd like to. Thank you for inviting me. I hope that I've added something to the podcast.
Yeah. Well, let us know if you're listening what you think of these different mysteries. Well, how many crowns you would give them, and put that in the comment section or on Twitter. We would love to hear your thoughts. And make sure you're following the podcast at Hallmarkies Pod and Hallmarkies Podcast, all of our social media, and on iTunes and YouTube. And if you are listening on iTunes, please leave us your ratings and reviews. It really helps us out. And if you're listening on YouTube, please give us a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel. That is so appreciative. And then you can follow me at Rachel's Reviews, all of our social media, iTunes, YouTube, everywhere. I just finished spending 10 days at the Sundance Film Festival, so I have all my reviews up for all of the films that I saw. So check that out. I would really appreciate it. And we also have our patron group, which is really fun, and we sure appreciate every single patron that we have. You can find more information in the description section for that. We give giveaways, exclusive content, lots of fun stuff going on there. We also have our merch store, which has all different kinds of Hallmark inspired merch for the Hardys and Hallmarkies in your life. So check that out. And thanks again, Dad. Really appreciate it. We'll definitely have to have you on again sometime. And we'll talk to you all later. Bye, everybody.